Shawn, thank you for joining us.
I'm very pleased to be here talking to you today and by extension talking to other Middlebury students and grads.
As we're all spending more time at home, watching television and streaming service programming, I think we're likely all aware of several of the overt effects the pandemic has had on the entertainment industry. What I'd like you to do, if you can, is share some of the less obvious effects that the environment is having on your industry.
The less obvious ones. Well, I think there's a lot of fear. We're an industry that has actors standing in front of each other from a foot and a half away, which is not best practices from the CDC in terms of how it behaves. So right now, as people probably do know, so much of our production has shut down as we're trying to figure out what ways we can resume production in a way to make it safe. My job really is divided into two parts. One is to write and to oversee the writing of the shows I have in production and to develop new shows, pitches and pilot scripts and everything. And then the other half of my job is to oversee the production of shows. Right now I have SWAT on CBS, and we've just been picked up for a 4th season, and we're trying to figure out how to go back into production. So I'm in a very odd situation in which half my job, the production side, has completely shut down. And I've had to become less a writer-producer and more of a global health expert, because now I have somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 to 300 employees that we're figuring out how we can get this show back into production. And it's ultimately going to fall on me as the boss to figure out how to do that safely and whether we can do it safely. I don't know that we've determined that we can do it safely yet, and until we do, we won't start rolling the cameras. So I guess maybe the thing that people wouldn't know about my profession, what we're doing, is that it's not just a creative enterprise right now. This pandemic has caused us to really think about the lives and welfare of the people that work for us. And as a result, we've had to do a lot of research so that I can understand how testing for COVID works and the lag times between when the test is taken and when you can get results and what that means and what recommendations do I give to the people that work on the show about how they should be behaving outside the job since they're going to come back in and be with us. What are my legal abilities to tell people and recommend how they should be living their lives outside the job? In some ways, that is kind of a no-no. You don't really want your employer telling you, where you can eat and what things you can do when you're away from the job. But is this a special case that I have to concern myself about? If someone is exhibiting unsafe behavior away from the job in a way that increases their odds of infection and they come back to the set and could endanger people, is that my place? That's something that I'm in the process of trying to figure out. So I would say from the outside, somebody would look at my job and say, well, he's a writer and he's a producer and he worries about writing and he worries about producing. But in this case, the pandemic has changed my job description. And it's made the stakes so much higher. It used to be if I didn't do my job well, the show would suck. But now if I don't do my job well, it could have real impact on the health and well-being of the people that work on the show. And that's a huge responsibility that I have to take seriously. So that's one aspect. You've got to manage people and their jobs and their lives. And you want to have empathy and understanding of what's going on with them and what we're all trying to achieve together to make the show. And can we do this in a way that is going to be safe for people? It's been quite a change for me in the last few months as I've taken on this challenge.
So Shawn, you mentioned that you were looking at other, I'll say, entertainment-related industries to kind of capture some of the learnings in their approaches that you might adopt for yourself. I'm just curious if you have any that come to mind as you've kind of scanned those other industries, what learnings you think were surprising to you that you would want to adapt for your own purposes?
Yeah, I would say I've been looking at the sports leagues, which are entertainment. I would also say that I've been looking at the plans that various colleges have in place. I read up on Middlebury's plan for education in the fall. I have a daughter who is going to be a junior at Colgate University, and so I'm very familiar with the plans that they've laid out. I live in Los Angeles, so you hear a lot about what USC is doing and how that plan has changed in recent weeks in an area of the country that, Southern California here, that's been seeing a sharp rise in cases. What I've learned from all these things is really how life is going to have to change. There's a human instinct to not want to believe the full weight of bad news sometimes. In fact, I watched a lecture / class that a Middlebury professor did online a couple months ago about psychology. In this case, it was the psychology of denial. Why do some people resist believing in the effects of climate change, despite the overwhelming science that supports it? And the answer is because they don't really want to deal with the repercussions of what comes with taking on climate change head on. And I think we're seeing a certain degree of psychology with this pandemic. We don't want to deal with this pandemic. We don't want to not be able to hug our friends. We don't want to not be able to go out to our favorite restaurant. We don't want to not be able to go see a concert of our favorite musical act. We don't want to not be able to travel to go where we want. And so there's a strong urge psychologically, I believe, to underplay the danger that this virus represents, to feel like, well, I've been good for 2 months. Now I can sort of take these steps forward because I'm just tired of having to deal with all these restrictions. So it's been very sobering and very educational for me to read about the protocols that the NBA is putting into place for their Orlando bubble and how they're going to try to keep people separated from the community at large. I look at these things and think about, okay, how is our crew going to behave away from the job? Can we trust them to lead and live responsible, safe lives away from the job, so that when they come back, their fellow workmates and cast members can have faith and trust that, okay, you're looking out for me in the same way I'm looking out for you. We're looking at a huge national experiment right now. Can we sacrifice a little bit of our own personal lives to take care of each other? I don't think we as people in this country have behaved as well as we need to look out for each other. And so as I look at these sports entities or these entertainment entities or these college environments and these schools and look at how they're going to attack things, so much of it to me comes down to, can you get people to behave responsibly and look out for each other? And that's something that has caused me to think a lot about, whether we're going to be able to behave responsibly as a group that makes SWAT and look out for each other. So it's something I spend a lot of time thinking about.